Married for 3 years, and my husband had never touched me. The day we divorced, when he saw my ID photo, he completely shattered. The rich aroma of slow-braised short ribs with a red wine reduction wafted through the sprawling penthouse kitchen. I meticulously used a clean cloth to wipe away a minuscule droplet of condensation from the rim of a pristine white porcelain bowl. Today was my third wedding anniversary with Ethan. For the past 3 years, I had dutifully played the role of a gentle, obedient wife, abandoning all my youthful ambitions to retreat into the background, tending to his every meal and comfort. I walked into the dining room, personally lighting the 2 elegant candles on the table. The clock chimed exactly 7 p.m. The front doors swung open, and the familiar, steady sound of his footsteps echoed through the foyer. Ethan entered, as impeccably stylish, cold, and arrogant as ever. His crisp white dress shirt was ironed without a single crease. A pale gray silk tie knotted perfectly at his neck. I smiled softly, stepping forward to help him with his overcoat. Ethan subtly leaned away, avoiding my touch. My hand froze in midair before slowly retracting. For 3 long years, he had never touched me, nor had he ever allowed me to cross the boundary of someone who simply shared his living space. He walked directly to the dining table, his gaze sweeping over the elaborately prepared dishes before settling on my face. Ethan reached into his suit jacket pocket, pulled out a thick manila envelope, and tossed it onto the glass tabletop. The sound of the envelope hitting the glass was sharp and dry, shattering the quiet atmosphere. I stared at it, a dark premonition rising in my chest. Ethan pulled out a chair and sat, lacing his fingers together on the table. His deep, husky voice was clear and deliberate. "Let's get a divorce." 4 simple words, uttered so lightly, yet they pierced my heart like a surgeon's scalpel. I stood frozen, struggling to keep my voice from trembling. "May I ask why? Today is our 3rd anniversary. Why would you choose this exact day to make such a cruel decision?" Ethan looked up at me, his narrow, piercing eyes devoid of any warmth. He answered calmly, "Mia's back in the country. She's waiting for me. I can't let her suffer any longer." The name Mia made my ears ring. Mia Hayes, his first love, the woman he had kept locked away in his heart all these years. I remembered that fateful night 3 years ago when Ethan was drugged by a business rival at a corporate gala. In his delirium, he had held me, repeatedly calling out Mia's name. When he woke the next morning, he insisted on taking responsibility and marrying me. I had naively believed that my sincere love and sacrifice would eventually warm his cold heart. I had been completely and utterly wrong. Ethan pushed the envelope toward me. He continued, his tone one of magnanimous charity. "Inside are the divorce papers, which I've already signed. There are also the transfer deeds for the Soho loft and a cashier's check for $5 million. The total value of your settlement is $10 million. That's enough for you to live comfortably for the rest of your life. A smart woman knows when to walk away. Don't make this difficult for either of us. $10 million. 3 years of my youth and devoted love, appraised by him with a soulless number." I slowly walked over and picked up the divorce papers. His signature was sharp, decisive, without a hint of hesitation. I lifted my head, looking directly into his eyes, swallowing the bitterness that threatened to spill from my own. I asked him one final question. "In 3 years, living under the same roof, eating at the same table, did you ever, even for a single moment, feel anything for me?" Ethan stood up, adjusting the button on his suit jacket. He looked at me with pity. "Never." The heartless reply extinguished the last flicker of hope in my soul. My heart felt as if it were being crushed, but strangely, not a single tear fell. The absolute despair had transformed into a layer of ice encasing my emotions. I nodded, reaching for the fountain pen lying next to the papers. That night, I didn't sleep. The vast penthouse was plunged into a cold, empty darkness. Ethan had left immediately after dropping the papers, as if he couldn't stand to be in this home for another second. I sat on the living room sofa, gazing at the decor I had personally selected. Everything now seemed like a cruel joke. As the first rays of dawn filtered through the curtains, I stood up and walked to the bedroom. I pulled a black suitcase from the corner of the walk-in closet and began packing my personal belongings. I only took a few simple outfits and my medical textbooks from my university days. All the expensive jewelry and designer dresses Ethan had bought me for holidays for appearance's sake, I folded neatly and left in the closet. I removed the wedding ring from my finger and placed it squarely on top of the divorce papers, alongside the $5 million check and the property deeds. I signed my name in the bottom right corner of the document. My signature was smooth and resolute, unburdened. I was leaving the entire $10 million settlement behind. I had entered this marriage with nothing but a heart full of love. Now, I was leaving with nothing but a heart that had gone numb. I took out my phone and dialed Leo. Leo was my best friend from college, now the chief of staff at a major international private hospital in the city. He answered immediately. "We're divorced. Can you come pick me up?" My voice was unnervingly calm. Leo was silent for a few seconds, then replied decisively, "I'll be there in 15 minutes. While waiting, I removed my old SIM card, snapped it in half, and tossed it in the trash. I used a backup phone, inserted a new SIM, and systematically blocked Ethan's number, his family's numbers, and all associated social media accounts. From the moment I walked out that door, we were done. No ties, no connection, forever. Leo's silver gray Audi R8 pulled up to the curb. He stepped out, dressed in a sharp navy blue suit. Seeing me with my small suitcase, he didn't ask questions. He quietly placed my bag in the trunk and opened the passenger door for me. The car pulled away, leaving the magnificent penthouse behind. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and felt a wave of freedom and relief wash over me. A few days later, Leo filled me in on the situation at Ethan's company. That morning, when Ethan's assistant brought him the signed divorce papers and the return settlement, he had been stunned. He never expected the docile, obedient wife he knew to walk away without taking a single cent. However, that surprise was quickly dismissed. Ethan's entire focus was now on Mia's health. She was suffering from a rare form of cardiomyopathy, and her condition was deteriorating rapidly. Ethan was leveraging every connection, throwing money everywhere to find a top-tier cardiothoracic surgeon known only by the pseudonym Dr. Sterling. Hearing this, I let out a faint, humorless smile. Ethan had no idea that the Dr. Sterling he was so desperately seeking was the very wife he had just cast aside. The city entered the late autumn, the crisp air carrying a hint of dampness. I had just finished a closed-door medical seminar for high-level specialists, secretly arranged by Leo. It had been so long since I'd been immersed in profound, professional debates on cardiothoracic surgery. The feeling of holding medical reports again, of analyzing complex surgical cases, made the blood in my veins feel alive. Stepping out of the conference center, I took a deep breath. Leo tossed the keys to his Porsche 911 towards me. He told me to drive. He'd had some wine at the networking reception and didn't want to risk a DUI. I caught the keys effortlessly and nodded. My driving skills had always impressed him. It was just that, for the past 3 years, living a quiet, pampered life, I had tucked those skills away. I slipped into the driver's seat and started the engine. The sports car roared to life with a powerful growl. Just as we merged into the heavy traffic on the main avenue, Leo tapped my arm and gestured with his chin toward the rearview mirror. "Your ex-husband's car." I glanced in the mirror. A black, luxurious Maybach was cruising slowly in the adjacent lane. The window was halfway down, enough for me to see the cold profile of Ethan's face. He was frowning, his gaze fixed on our car. He had clearly recognized my familiar silhouette in the driver's seat. Instantly, the Maybach accelerated, signaling to change lanes, and began tailing us closely. I gripped the steering wheel, my eyes turning sharp and cold. What did he want? To see which new tycoon his weak ex-wife was with now. I had no interest in satisfying his curiosity. I downshifted and pressed the accelerator. The Porsche shot forward like a predator, leaving the Maybach far behind. Ethan seemed provoked and sped up in pursuit. The two cars weaved through the bustling city traffic. I remained perfectly calm, my eyes darting, spotting every opening in the road. At a major intersection, the traffic light began to flash yellow. I pushed the accelerator a little harder, expertly maneuvering around the front of a refrigerated truck and shooting across the line just as the light turned red. Ethan's Maybach was trapped behind a line of stopped vehicles. In my side mirror, I saw him slam his hand on the steering wheel in frustration. I smirked, turned onto a smaller side street, and lost him completely. "Damn, you drive aggressively," Leo said, bursting into laughter. I slowed down to a normal speed. "I don't want any lingering ties to the past," I told him. "From today on, the weak, submissive Evelyn Reed is dead. I have to live as my true self again." That evening, Leo and I sat in his private study at his home. He poured me a glass of water, his expression serious. He urged me to officially return to medicine. My talent in cardiothoracic surgery was revered in international medical circles. The name Dr. Sterling had once been a beacon of hope for countless patients with terminal illnesses. For me to bury that talent in a kitchen for 3 years was a tremendous waste for society. I took a sip of water, thought for a moment, and nodded. It was time to take back what belonged to me. The next morning, I took a bank card with my personal savings from before my marriage and went to the most luxurious mall in the city. I discarded all the muted, conservative dresses Ethan's mother had forced me to wear to look proper. I chose exquisitely tailored, professional outfits that highlighted my slender figure. I went to a high-end salon, had my long, flowing hair cut into a chic, sharp bob that curved just at my shoulders. I applied a coat of classic red lipstick and looked at myself in the mirror. A woman, no longer concerned with love, naturally begins to shine. As I was leaving a designer boutique, I ran into Ethan. He was with a few assistants, inspecting one of his corporation's retail stores. When our eyes met, I saw pure shock in his. He froze, seemingly unable to believe that the stylish, confident, and fiercely independent woman before him was the same ex-wife who had always kept her head down. I didn't flinch, walking past him as if he were a complete stranger, the sound of my heels clicking with a steady, proud rhythm on the polished marble floor. Leaving the mall, I drove straight to Leo's International Hospital. I had an appointment with Dr. Mark Anderson, a senior colleague from my residency and now the head of cardiothoracic surgery. Dr. Anderson was thrilled to hear I was returning to work. He handed me a stack of patient files, the most complex surgical cases, to help me get back up to speed. I sat in his office, flipping through the files. Suddenly, my hand stopped on a red tab folder, indicating an extremely critical case. The patient's name, printed in bold on the first page, caught my eye. Mia Hayes. I carefully read every line of the test results and X-ray reports. Her cardiomyopathy was incredibly complex. Her heart valves were showing signs of necrosis and required a high-risk replacement surgery. In the United States right now, the number of surgeons willing to be the lead on such a case could be counted on one hand, and the success rate was terrifyingly low. No wonder Ethan was desperately pressuring Leo to find Dr. Sterling. Just then, there was a knock. The door opened, and Ethan walked in. He was there to personally inquire about the progress of inviting an international specialist. I quickly grabbed a surgical mask from the desk and put it on, pulling on a surgical cap as well. Dr. Anderson understood immediately and introduced me as a new intern there to pick up files. I gave a brief nod, gathered the charts, and walked quickly out of the room, brushing past Ethan at the doorway. His familiar, masculine cologne wafted past, but this time it stirred nothing within me. Seated in Leo's secure office on the top floor of the hospital, I placed Mia Hayes' red-tabbed file on the glass desk. The complex medical data, color Doppler images, and blood test results all painted a grim picture. The woman's heart was failing, severely. Damaged valves were causing constant regurgitation, leading to an enlarged heart muscle that was losing its ability to contract. Without a valve replacement and structural heart repair soon, she would certainly die. Leo sat across from me, fiddling with a metal pen, his eyes gauging my reaction. He informed me that Ethan's corporation was putting immense pressure on the hospital's board of directors. Ethan was willing to sign a blank check, charter a private jet, and provide the best support team, all for a single nod from Dr. Sterling. "So, what's your decision?" Leo asked gently. "Will operating on your rival be a problem for you?" I leaned back in my chair, my gaze calm as I looked out the floor-to-ceiling window at the bustling city below. My mind was filled only with the cold, rational logic of a surgeon. To me, on the operating table, there is only a patient and an organ that needs repair, I replied. Mia Hayes, or anyone else, is just another case among the hundreds I've performed. However, I'm not doing charity work for my ex-husband. He stole 3 years of my youth. Now it's time for me to collect what my skills are worth. I instructed Leo to draft a special medical services contract. The fee I demanded was $1 million, cash, to be paid in full upon signing, regardless of the surgical outcome. I also stipulated 3 absolute confidentiality clauses. First, I would have no direct contact with the patient or any family members before or after the surgery. Second, all professional communication and health updates would be relayed through my representative, Leo. Third, during all consultations and the surgery itself, I would wear full protective gear, use a voice modulator, and strictly prohibit any form of recording or photography. Any breach of these terms by the patient's family would result in the immediate cancellation of the surgery, and the $1 million fee would be non-refundable. Leo burst out laughing. He praised my decisiveness and immediately called his assistant to draft the document. 30 minutes later, the contract, with its ironclad terms, was printed. Leo personally took it to the VIP lounge where Ethan was waiting. I remained in the office, sipping a black coffee, no sugar. The bitter taste sharpened my focus. 15 minutes later, Leo returned, tossing the contract, now bearing Ethan's sharp, forceful signature, onto the table. He recounted that when Ethan read the unreasonable terms and the $1 million price tag, his face had darkened. He had slammed his hand on the table, furiously accusing Dr. Sterling of being a shameless extortionist, profiting from human life. But when Leo calmly stated that these were the non-negotiable terms and that Dr. Sterling was prepared to fly back to Europe immediately, Ethan had been forced to grit his teeth and sign. I picked up the contract. His signature on this paper was fiercer, more deeply indented than the one on our divorce papers a few days ago. The arrogance of a CEO who always stood at the pinnacle of power had finally been forced to bow before the life and death of the woman he loved. I folded the contract and put it in my purse. The $1 million transaction had officially begun. From this moment on, I was in absolute control, and he was the one who had to obey. On Monday morning, I moved into a luxury apartment on the 35th floor of a central tower. The apartment, owned by Leo, was designed in a minimalist style with a white and gray palette, featuring a multi-layered facial recognition security system and a private elevator. Standing on the breezy balcony, I had a panoramic view of the entire city. My phone on the table buzzed. I walked inside and answered. It was Leo, his voice laced with amusement. He informed me that Ethan's assistant, Alex, was mobilizing significant resources to find information about Evelyn Reed. They had scoured real estate agencies, checked airline passenger lists, and even questioned neighbors around the old, modest apartment I had lived in as a student. My residency records were completely clean, as Leo had scrubbed them beforehand. Ethan was growing restless. He suspected I had found some powerful man to back me, helping me vanish without a trace. I told Leo to let them search. The more effort Ethan wasted, the more he would realize he never truly knew the woman who had shared his bed for 3 years. I hung up and went to my desk, opening a specialized computer system connected directly to the hospital's secure server. Today was my first confidential video consultation with Ethan's medical team. At exactly 2 p.m., I launched the encrypted video call software. I drew the curtains, plunging the room into darkness, leaving only a single desk lamp casting a soft glow on the wall behind me. I wore a white lab coat, a surgical cap, and an N95 mask that covered 2/3 of my face. The voice modulator was clipped to my collar, set to produce a deep, androgynous tone. I hit connect. The screen split in two. One side showed my shadowy figure, the other, the brightly lit conference room at the hospital. Ethan sat at the center, hands clasped on the table. Around him were Dr. Anderson and the city's top cardiologists. Mia was not present, likely too unwell to leave her bed. Ethan's gaze, sharp as a razor, bored through the camera lens as if trying to strip away my disguise. The atmosphere in their room was tense. Dr. Anderson broke the silence, summarizing Mia's cardiac activity over the past 24 hours. I listened intently, jotting down key figures in a notebook. When he finished, I spoke. The sound that came through their speakers was cold, even, and completely alien. I directly analyzed the flaws in their current treatment plan, pointing out how the high-dose diuretics were severely impairing the patient's renal function. I demanded they immediately cease 2 types of ACE inhibitors and replace them with a direct myocardial support regimen that I had designed. Everyone in the room was silent, diligently taking notes. My precise judgment and overwhelming expertise left no room for debate. Only Ethan remained in his original posture, his brows slightly furrowed. He suddenly interrupted me. "Dr. Sterling, your voice, it sounds strange. I feel like we've met somewhere before." His words were a clear probe. Ethan was extremely perceptive. His intuition had likely caught something familiar in my cadence or choice of words. Even though the tone was completely altered, I showed no hint of being flustered. I looked directly into the camera, my modulated voice becoming even colder and sharper. "I am not being paid to answer prying personal questions. If Mr. Crawford has doubts about my professional competence, he is free to terminate this contract right now. The breach of contract fee can be wired directly to my account by 5 p.m. today. My aggressive counterattack left Ethan speechless. He clenched his fist, but ultimately had to lower his voice and apologize for his impertinence. I gave a cold nod, then instructed Dr. Anderson to prepare a simulation lab and send all 3 DCT scan data to my server within the hour. I decisively ended the call. The screen went black, returning the room to silence. The first confrontation was a perfect success. Ethan was completely in the dark, with no inkling of the truth staring him in the face. 3 days after the consultation, Mia's condition took a turn for the worse. Her vital signs were fluctuating erratically, forcing me to go to the hospital for a direct physical examination. Leo implemented the highest level of security. The entire 8th floor of the intensive care unit was sealed off. Security cameras in the hallway were temporarily disabled. All nurses and doctors on duty were reassigned, leaving only Dr. Anderson to assist me. I entered the changing room and began to don my specialized protective gear, a layer of blue scrubs underneath, covered by a long, sterile surgical gown. I wore a cloth cap that covered all of my hair and neck, then carefully fitted an N95 mask to my face. Finally, I put on a pair of large, clear plastic safety goggles. Looking in the mirror, I assessed my appearance. A perfect disguise, revealing no identifying features, turning me into a soulless medical machine. I pushed open the door to the VIP room. The air inside was thick with the smell of antiseptic, mixed with the faint scent of lilies on the bedside table. Mia lay motionless on the white bed, connected to an oxygen machine and a host of monitors that beeped in a steady rhythm. Her face was pale and lifeless, her eyes closed. The vibrant, proud woman from Ethan's photos was now just a fragile life, clinging to each artificial beat. Her weakness was a stark contrast to the manipulative schemes she had used to pull Ethan back to her side. I approached the bed and began the clinical examination. My gloved hand moved over her chest, pressing gently on points around her ribs to assess fluid retention. I placed my stethoscope over her heart valves, listening to the telltale sound of blood flowing backward. Her rhythm was erratic, her heart muscle showing signs of stiffening. I rapidly recorded the measurements on her chart, making sharp assessments for Dr. Anderson to update in her electronic file. For the entire 30 minutes, I said nothing unnecessary, completely focused on my work. Finishing the exam, I nodded for Dr. Anderson to continue monitoring the IV drip and turned to leave. Just as the door to the room opened, a blast of cold air from the hallway hit my face. I walked towards the private elevator at the end of the hall, the thick protective gear rustling with each step. Suddenly, from a blind corner leading to the waiting area, a tall figure stepped out, blocking my path. The fluorescent lights illuminated a familiar, angular face and those narrow, sharp eyes. It was Ethan. He was wearing a stark black suit, his presence imposing and overwhelming. His appearance in a sealed-off area proved he had used his power to force his way through security. I stopped, maintaining a safe distance of about 6 feet. My gaze remained calm behind the safety goggles, unwavering. Ethan narrowed his eyes, his gaze sweeping over me from head to toe. The sharp scrutiny of a man accustomed to dominating the boardroom was on full display. He noted my height, the way I held my back straight, and especially the ratio of my shoulders to my waist. These subtle details, though well hidden, couldn't be completely disguised by the bulky gown. "Dr. Sterling," he said, his voice low and threatening. "Your posture feels incredibly familiar." I didn't answer, simply sidestepping to my right to continue towards the elevator. My silence seemed to fuel his suspicion. He immediately extended a long arm, blocking my path again. The tension in the hallway became palpable. He took a long stride closer, his right hand shooting out towards the N95 mask on my face, a clear attempt to unmask the mysterious doctor. In that split second, just as his fingers were inches from my face, another strong hand shot out from behind me, clamping down on his wrist. A cold, sharp voice cut through the silence. "Mr. Crawford, please respect the confidentiality protocols of this hospital." Leo stepped forward, using his own tall frame to shield me from Ethan. He was wearing his white chief of staff coat, his face exuding absolute authority. Leo's grip was powerful, yanking Ethan's arm away from my personal space. Ethan retracted his hand, his eyes now blazing as he glared at Leo. He loudly demanded to know why the hospital was hiding the identity of a doctor receiving a $1 million fee. He argued that he had a legal right to know who would be holding a scalpel to his loved one. Leo just smirked, his demeanor perfectly composed. He pulled a copy of the signed contract from his breast pocket and pointed directly to the third clause. He reminded Ethan that a signature on a legally binding document was paramount. Attempting to violate the privacy of a medical expert was a serious breach of contract. If Ethan continued to obstruct, the hospital would immediately cease all medical services, cancel the surgery, and have security escort him from the building. The full consequences for the life of patient Mia Hayes would then be Ethan's sole responsibility. Leo's sharp, irrefutable logic hit Ethan's weak spot. Mia's life was entirely in Dr. Sterling's hands. Ethan gritted his teeth, a vein throbbing in his temple. But he couldn't argue. He was forced to take a step back and yield. I didn't linger for a second, walking past him and straight into the waiting elevator. The cold metal doors slid shut, cutting off the sight of my ex-husband's frustrated, hateful gaze. After the tense confrontation, Leo escorted me to the underground parking garage via an internal, directors-only passage. I quickly shed the suffocating protective gear, tossing it into a biohazard disposal bin. Changing back into my comfortable business attire, I got into Leo's Porsche. The weather outside had turned. Dark clouds gathered over the city, and the first raindrops began to splatter against the windshield. As the car left the garage and joined the slow-moving, he remarked that Ethan's powers of observation were terrifying. Even a slight familiarity in my gait was enough to make him suspicious. Leo suggested that for future visits, he would arrange for other medical staff with similar builds to surround me, creating a distraction. I nodded in agreement. Absolute security for my identity was paramount. Suddenly, the car in front of us braked hard to avoid a large puddle. Leo reacted instantly, slamming on the brakes, bringing the Porsche to a safe stop. We were stationary for less than 2 seconds when a loud, screeching crash came from behind. A powerful force slammed into us, shoving the Porsche forward a few feet. My back hit the seat hard, the seatbelt digging into my shoulder, making me wince. We'd been rear-ended. Leo cursed under his breath, turned on the hazard lights, and angrily opened his door to step out into the rain. I remained in the passenger seat, having no intention of getting out. The Porsche's windows were tinted with the most expensive privacy film, making it impossible for anyone to see inside. Through the rain-streaked glass, I watched the scene unfold. The culprit was a flashy red sports car. Its front end was severely crumpled from hitting the sturdy rear of the Porsche. The door of the red car swung open, and a young woman emerged. She wore a ridiculously short designer dress and stiletto heels, holding an expensive handbag over her head to shield herself from the rain. The moment I saw her heavily made-up face, I recognized her. Olivia, Ethan's younger sister. Olivia had a habit of relying on her family's power and money to get her way. She had been driving recklessly in the rain, not maintaining a safe distance, likely distracted by her phone. But instead of admitting fault, she immediately adopted the attitude of a spoiled princess. She pointed a finger at Leo, screaming at him in the middle of the noisy street. She accused him of brake-checking her to set up an insurance scam, threatening to call her brother to come and smash his car to pieces. Leo crossed his arms, his expression like ice. He didn't bother arguing with someone so unreasonable. He simply took out his phone and calmly photographed the accident scene, capturing the license plates and the point of impact. He told Olivia bluntly that the scene was documented and the fault was clearly hers for tailgating. He gave her 2 options: call the police to file a report or compensate him for the repairs on his several $100,000 Porsche. At the mention of money, Olivia's eyes widened. She quickly grabbed her phone and made a call for help. Just 15 minutes later, a familiar Maybach cut through the rain and pulled up to the curb. Ethan got out, holding a large black umbrella. He quickly approached the scene. Olivia ran to him, grabbing his arm and bursting into fake sobs, repeating her story of being bullied. Ethan's eyes flickered from his sister's crumpled car to the heavily scratched rear of the Porsche. Finally, his gaze landed on Leo. He immediately recognized the hospital director he had clashed with less than an hour ago. A flash of surprise crossed his face, quickly replaced by the calm demeanor of a negotiator. Knowing his sister's personality, he didn't need to ask who was at fault. He walked up to Leo, adopting a conciliatory but superior tone. He suggested they let this go, offering to have Leo's car repaired at the best auto shop and cover all costs. He framed it as a favor, a way to smooth over their tense relationship for the sake of Mia's treatment. Leo just smirked. He flatly refused Ethan's calculated offer. He stated that this was a civil traffic incident. The cost of repairs was trivial, but Olivia's entitled and dangerous behavior was unacceptable. He demanded that Ethan wire him $20,000 on the spot as a lesson for his sister's recklessness. If the money wasn't transferred, Leo would call the police and ensure the morning papers had a story about the Crawford Corporation chairman's sister causing an accident and acting like a thug. Ethan's brow furrowed, his pride stung by being lectured on how to manage his family. But faced with Leo's resolve and the threat of bad press, he had no choice. He took out his phone and initiated the transfer. While waiting for the transaction to complete, Ethan's gaze drifted to the Porsche. He stared intently at the blacked-out passenger window, as if his intuition told him someone was inside. He took a slow step forward, squinting, trying to find a gap to peer through the film. I sat perfectly still, my breathing even, my cold eyes meeting his searching gaze through the glass. We were separated by a pane of rain-streaked glass, yet the real distance between us was an unbridgeable chasm. Leo's phone beeped, signaling the receipt of the money. He patted the roof of his car, loudly advising Ethan to teach his sister some manners, then got back in. The Porsche roared to life and sped off into the downpour, leaving the Crawford siblings standing stranded on the cold, wet street. I glanced in the rearview mirror and smiled faintly. The pathetic state of my former family no longer concerned me in the slightest. 2 weeks after the accident, the city's medical community held its annual charity gala and academic symposium. The event brought together leading medical experts, hospital executives, and prominent business leaders invested in the healthcare sector. Leo had sent me an honorary invitation, believing it was the perfect time for Dr. Evelyn Reed to officially reemerge on the medical scene, independent and entirely separate from the overly scrutinized Dr. Sterling. That evening, I stood before a full-length mirror, choosing my attire. I decided to completely shed the demure image of the past 3 years. I selected a floor-length evening gown made of emerald green silk. The design featured an elegant, deep V-neck and a daring open back that accentuated the perfect lines of my body. A high slit in the skirt made every step graceful and commanding. I slipped on a pair of sparkling, crystal-embellished heels, styled my short hair into a sophisticated updo, and accessorized with a pair of striking black pearl earrings. My makeup emphasized my sharp eyes and a bold, crimson lip. The woman in the mirror was radiant, confident, and full of life. A luxury car sent by the hospital dropped me at the grand entrance of the 5-star hotel. As the door opened, camera flashes from the press photographers went off continuously. I stepped out, held my head high, and smiled graciously in response to the respectful greetings from the event organizers. Entering the magnificent ballroom, filled with the glow of crystal chandeliers and the sound of a string quartet, I quickly blended into the atmosphere of the intellectual elite. Leo approached, taking my arm and leading me to the center of the room to introduce me to several international experts. There, I was reunited with Professor Richard Davies, a master of cardiac surgery with whom I had collaborated during my fellowship at Johns Hopkins. The professor was both surprised and delighted to see me. We quickly fell into a deep professional conversation. I spoke fluent English, articulating complex medical terminology with perfect pronunciation. I confidently analyzed for him the advantages of minimally invasive mitral valve repair surgery, while also pointing out the potential risks during cardiopulmonary bypass. The surrounding specialists listened in silence, their eyes showing genuine admiration for a young female doctor with such profound knowledge. Just as our conversation reached its peak, I felt a cold presence from behind. My intuition told me someone was staring at me. I slowly finished my point with Professor Davies and turned around. Standing about 5 feet away, frozen in place, was Ethan. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, holding a glass of red wine, accompanied by several business partners. He was clearly here to network for Mia's treatment. His eyes were locked on me, his expression shifting from astonishment and disbelief to utter shock. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words seemed to catch in his throat. The ex-wife he had always dismissed as uneducated and provincial, fit only for the kitchen, was now standing in a grand ballroom, confidently conversing in flawless English with the world's leading experts. The contrast was like a sharp slap to his ingrained arrogance. Excusing himself from his companions, Ethan walked quickly toward me. He stopped right in front of me, the familiar scent of his cigar mixing with an aura of tension. "What in the world are you doing here?" he demanded. his voice low and strained with suppressed anger. "Who gave you permission to dress like this and come to such a place?" I slowly swirled the champagne in my flute, my indifferent gaze sweeping over his scowling face. I replied with a mocking half-smile. "Mr. Crawford, you seem to have forgotten that we are divorced. The papers are signed, the proceedings are finalized. Where I go, what I wear, and who I talk to are entirely my personal freedoms. What right do you have to question me?" My sharp retort left him speechless. He gripped his wine glass so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had never been so bluntly contradicted by me. He lowered his voice, trying to salvage some dignity. He accused me of putting on a show, using the settlement money which he didn't know I'd return to buy expensive clothes and infiltrate high society just to get his attention. His delusion was almost comical. I took a half-step closer, just enough for him to hear my every word. I enunciated each syllable, completely crushing his arrogance. "I returned every single cent of your $10 million settlement to buy back my own integrity. The dress I'm wearing, my presence here tonight, it was all earned through my own abilities. You should reconsider your own importance. In my eyes, right now, you are worth less than a pathological medical report." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, stunned, in the middle of the gala. The emerald silk of my gown brushed past his leg, cold and indifferent. I rejoined Leo and the other specialists, raising my glass in a toast, completely erasing Ethan's presence from my world. 3 days after the charity gala, my life returned to its busy rhythm at the hospital. On Friday afternoon, just as I had finished a complex vascular reconstruction surgery, Leo called. His voice was tense and frustrated. He had just received an anonymous tip that his ex-girlfriend from college, a woman named Chloe, whom he had deeply loved, was being conned by a notorious playboy at a private club called the Onyx Club. This guy was known for drugging young women. Leo wanted me to go with him, thinking another woman might have a better chance of talking sense into her. I stripped off my surgical gloves, scrubbed my hands, and agreed immediately. The Onyx Club was the most exclusive private entertainment venue in the city, reserved for an elite clientele with special memberships. It was famous for its opulent VIP rooms, discreet poker games, and extravagant amusements. I went back to my apartment and changed into a sleek black jumpsuit, adding a short leather jacket. It was stylish but practical for moving quickly. At 7 p.m., Leo and I arrived. He used his Diamond Tier membership card to get us escorted directly to the VIP section on the 20th floor. The hallway was lined with plush red carpet, the air thick with the scent of expensive liquor and heavy perfume. Leo quickly located Chloe's room. He told me to wait in the hall while he went in to deal with the playboy and get her out. I nodded, leaning against the oak-paneled wall, arms crossed, and waited. Less than 5 minutes later, the door to a VIP room directly opposite mine suddenly swung open. The sound of loud laughter and the clatter of poker chips spilled out. A man stepped out, loosening his tie with one hand and holding a lit cigar in the other, a plume of gray smoke swirling around him. I glanced over and immediately recognized him. Ethan. The world was truly a small place. My presence in a decadent place like the Onyx Club brought a flicker of surprise to his eyes, which quickly morphed into a look of scorn and disdain. He stubbed out his cigar in an ashtray on a marble pedestal and walked slowly toward me. "So, the moment you leave the Crawford family, you degrade yourself to chasing men into places like this?" His tone was dripping with caustic ridicule. I stood up straight, unfazed by his insult. I looked him directly in the eye, my response utterly cold. "Your standards for judging character are pathetically low. My reasons for being here are none of your business. On the contrary, for a corporate chairman to abandon his dying lover in a hospital to come gamble and carouse, now that is truly despicable." My words hit a nerve, striking the guilt that was beginning to fester inside him. His face instantly darkened, his anger exploding. He suddenly reached out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was incredibly strong, leaving red marks on my skin. Before I could resist, he pulled me forcefully into the VIP room he had just exited. The door slammed shut behind us. Inside the large suite, a group of 5 or 6 men sat around a green felt poker table. Among them were Tyler and Jake, notorious playboys and close business associates of Ethan's. They stared, bewildered, as Ethan dragged an unfamiliar woman into the room. Tyler let out a low whistle, teasing Ethan about bringing a woman to the table for good luck. Ethan pushed me down into an empty leather chair beside him and threw a stack of chips worth hundreds of thousands of dollars onto the table. He was forcing me to play, intending to use his wealth and expertise in a game of bluffs to humiliate me in front of his friends. He declared coldly that if I could win the chips on the table, he would leave me alone. If I lost, I had to bow my head and apologize for my arrogant words. I rubbed my sore wrist, my eyes scanning the cards being dealt. Texas Hold'em, a game of probability and psychology. For a surgeon accustomed to calculating life and death odds to the decimal point, this was elementary. I smirked and nodded my assent. The first hand began. I looked at my 2 hole cards, my face a perfect, emotionless mask. Ethan and his friends made large bets, trying to apply psychological pressure. When it was my turn, I calmly pushed my entire stack of chips to the center of the table. A direct all-in. The bold move silenced the room. Tyler and Jake exchanged wary glances and folded. It was down to a heads-up between Ethan and me. He stared into my eyes, searching for a flicker of fear or hesitation, but found none. My eyes were as still as a frozen lake. He gritted his teeth and called the bet. The dealer turned over the flop. An ace, a 7, and a 9. I turned over my whole cards. A pair of aces. With the ace on the board, I had 3 of a kind, the strongest possible hand. The probability of Ethan holding a better hand was less than 3%. Stunned, Ethan revealed his cards. He only had a pair of kings. I calmly reached out and raked the massive pile of chips toward me. The sound of the plastic clacking together was delightful. Ethan's friends stared, their mouths agape. They couldn't believe this slender woman played with such ruthless precision. I stood up, smoothed out my jacket, and looked down at Ethan with pity. The games of idle men are so tedious. Thank you for the donation. I'll be sure to wire it to the Children's Heart Surgery Foundation. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving Ethan and his friends drowning in a sea of humiliation. The door opened just as Leo was emerging from the opposite room with Chloe. I smiled at him, took his arm, and together we left the Onyx Club, ending a dramatic but deeply satisfying night. Standing outside the Onyx Club, the night wind whipped at the hem of my leather jacket. Leo was carefully helping Chloe stand upright. His ex-girlfriend was in a semi-conscious state, retching from being forced to drink too much cheap liquor mixed with something else. Leo frowned, his eyes filled with worry and apology as he looked at me. He explained that Chloe was in bad shape and needed to go to the emergency room at his hospital for an IV drip and a full workup. His Porsche was a 2-seater, so taking me home was impossible. I nodded decisively and told him to go. A person's health always came first. I took out my phone and ordered a luxury car service to take me back to my apartment. Just as Leo's sports car sped off, a familiar black Maybach pulled up from the underground garage and stopped directly in front of me. The rear window slowly lowered, revealing Ethan's angular face and cold, sharp eyes. The air around me seemed to freeze under his commanding gaze. "Get in," he said, his voice deep and carrying an undeniable tone of command. "It's late, and this area isn't safe for a woman alone. I'll take you home." I crossed my arms, remaining on the granite steps, with no intention of moving. I coolly refused his offer. "There's no relationship between us that requires this excessive gallantry," I stated plainly. "Besides, the car I ordered will be here in 3 minutes." He didn't give up. He pushed his door open and got out, his tall frame blocking the streetlight. Ignoring my resistance, he grabbed my elbow, using just enough force to compel me towards the back seat of the Maybach. It happened so quickly, I didn't have time to react. The door slammed shut, trapping me in a confined space filled with the familiar scents of his cigar and cologne. The driver took the cue, started the engine, and pulled away. I adjusted my clothes and slid as close to the window as possible, maintaining maximum distance from the man beside me. The car fell into a suffocating silence. The yellow streetlights slid across Ethan's face, illuminating the contemplative, calculating look in his eyes. After a while, he broke the silence with an offer so ridiculous it was laughable. He said he could arrange a position for me as the head of human resources at one of his subsidiary companies. The salary would be in the 6 figures, with generous benefits, guaranteeing a life of luxury. He assumed my refusal of the $10 million settlement was just a tactic, a way to appear noble to manipulate him into offering more. I turned to look him directly in the eye, my red lips curling into a deeply sarcastic smile. His delusions of power were truly incurable. I enunciated every word of my reply. "I'll say this one more time. I do not need your charity, and I certainly have no interest in working for a man who doesn't understand the value of family." My poker skills tonight. The clothes on my back, they all come from my own ability, my own finances, and my own intellect. You can take your condescending worldview and stop trying to measure my worth with your titles and your money." Ethan was silent, his Adam's apple bobbing. My words were like daggers, piercing the armor of self-satisfaction he always wore. He turned to look out the window, not repeating his absurd offer. The car glided through quiet intersections, finally turning into an upscale residential complex in the heart of the city. This was one of the most secure areas, reserved for the true elite. The Maybach stopped at the main gate of the Rose Tower, which required a residence key card or facial recognition to enter the lobby. Surprise was clear on Ethan's face. He never imagined I could be living in a place so exclusive and expensive. As I reached for the door handle, he spoke again, stopping me. His voice was weary, but still held an edge of command. He informed me that his mother, Helen, had just returned from Europe that morning. She didn't know we had finalized our divorce. Her high blood pressure had been acting up, and her doctor had warned against any major emotional shocks. He demanded that I come with him to the Crawford family estate this Saturday for dinner, to play the part of the happy couple one last time. I paused, turning back to him. Helen was the only person in his family who had ever treated me with genuine kindness and affection. Over the past 3 years, during my loneliest moments, she was the one who would defend me, scolding Ethan for his coldness. The respect I had for her was sincere, though I now despised Ethan. Hurting an elderly, sick woman went against my conscience as a doctor. I thought for a moment and then agreed. But I set a clear condition. This would be the last time I ever set foot in that house. After this dinner, it was his responsibility to tell his mother the truth. I opened the door, got out, and walked into the lobby without a single glance back. Saturday evening arrived, draped in a thin, cool mist. I stood before my closet, carefully selecting my costume for the night's performance. I put away the form-fitting, seductive dresses and chose a long, cream-colored silk gown with a modest round neckline. I skillfully used pins to tuck away the sharp ends of my bob, creating an elegant and demure low bun. I removed my bold makeup, replacing it with a touch of tinted sunscreen and pale pink lipstick. Within 30 minutes, I had transformed back into the gentle, submissive wife of the past 3 years. Looking in the mirror, I gave myself a wry, self-mocking smile. A perfect disguise. At 6 p.m., Ethan's Maybach was waiting. I stepped out, my movements deliberate and reserved, my gaze stripped of its usual sharpness. As I got into the passenger seat, Ethan, who had been looking at an iPad, froze. His eyes scanned my simple dress, my plain face, my timid posture. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. Perhaps he hadn't expected me to slip into character so quickly and so perfectly. He looked away, cleared his throat, and told the driver to go. The drive to the suburban estate took nearly an hour. Neither of us spoke. As we pulled up to the grand iron gates, Ethan got out, walked around, and opened my door. He took my hand. His was large and strangely warm against my cold skin. I flinched slightly, but forced myself to relax, allowing him to lead me into the living room. Helen was on the sofa, sipping tea. Seeing us, her kind face lit up. She stood, opening her arms to embrace me, then chided Ethan for letting me get so thin, asking if he was neglecting his family for work. I smiled gently, patting her back. "It's just the change in weather. My appetite's been a little off," I lied smoothly. "Ethan has been very caring. He's always buying me supplements." The lie felt vile, but for the sake of Helen's radiant smile, I continued the charade. Dinner was an elaborate affair. I proactively served rice, placed the best cuts of meat in my mother-in-law's bowl, and then gently added food to Ethan's plate. Every gesture, every glance I sent his way, conveyed the deep affection of a devoted wife. Ethan sat stiffly, his chopsticks trembling slightly in his hand. My feigned affection was an all-too-real reenactment of our first, peaceful years together. His gaze held a mixture of bewilderment and a strange, unreadable emotion. He was completely caught in the illusion I had created. As dinner was ending, Helen dismissed the staff. Her expression became serious. She looked at both of us and reminded us that we had been married for 3 years, long enough to have settled our careers and nurtured our relationship. The most important goal now was to produce an heir for the family legacy. She suspected the delay was not my fault. She believed the pressure of running the corporation had caused health issues for him, making it difficult to conceive. I lowered my head, my hands gripping my dress, trying to suppress a burst of hysterical laughter. Helen's directness was a mortal blow to the pride of a man as arrogant as Ethan. His face darkened. He put his chopsticks down hard, trying to explain that his health was fine, but the company had too many major projects at the moment. Helen would accept no excuses. She slammed her hand on the table and issued a direct order. At 9 a.m. on Monday, Ethan was to put all work aside and personally take me to the city's top fertility clinic for a comprehensive checkup. She would send her personal assistant to supervise and report the results directly to her. If Ethan had a problem, it needed to be treated immediately. No excuses, no hiding. I looked up at Ethan with tear-filled eyes, feigning an expression of hurt and resignation. I gently urged him to listen to his mother, not to upset her overwork. My caring words were the final nail in his coffin, cutting off any possible argument. He stared at me, his jaw clenched, but he couldn't say a word of refusal in front of his mother. The disastrous dinner ended in a terrifying silence, leaving the mighty CEO with a death sentence, a mandatory fertility exam. The family dinner concluded in an atmosphere of suffocating tension. Ethan used the excuse of an urgent international video conference to leave early. Helen agreed but reiterated her ironclad order about the clinic on Monday. I politely bid her good night, put on my light coat, and followed Ethan out the door. The moment we were out of Helen's sight, all my gentle, submissive demeanor vanished, replaced by my familiar cold, decisive air. The night air in the suburbs was bitingly cold. I walked quickly towards the driveway, desperate to escape the suffocating pretense. Ethan followed close behind, the sound of his leather shoes on the gravel, a rapid, angry rhythm. When I reached the Maybach, I didn't wait for the driver, reaching for the handle myself. In that instant, a powerful force yanked my arm back. Ethan lunged forward, pinning me against the cold metal of the car. His broad shoulders blocked the overhead light, casting my face in shadow. His eyes were bloodshot, his ragged breath seething with explosive fury. "Your performance was flawless," he snarled, each word laced with venom. "You must feel quite pleased with yourself, using my mother to trample all over my pride." I remained still, my eyes unflinchingly meeting his rage. "I have no obligation to endure this baseless accusation. Playing the part of a submissive wife was our agreement to protect your mother's health. I fulfilled my part of the bargain. I suggest you arrange a time with our lawyers to file the papers with the court and finalize this divorce legally. I have no desire to waste another second of my precious time on this meaningless family drama." Hearing the word divorce spoken with such impatient indifference, Ethan's face grew even darker. His grip on my wrist tightened, sending a sharp pain up my arm. He seemed triggered by my absolute finality. He leaned in close, his voice a low, jealous snarl. "Are you in such a hurry to cut ties with my family so you can officially fall into the arms of that hospital director, Leo?" He accused me of having a puppet master, claiming that all my dramatic changes were due to someone else's influence. His childish deduction made me laugh, a short, sharp sound of contempt. "Mr. Crawford, your imagination is running wild," I said, my voice like steel, shattering his delusions. "Who I date after we are legally divorced is my right, protected by law. You spend your days and nights doting on your first love, Mia. What right do you have to stop me from finding my own happiness? Don't project the selfishness of a failed man onto my life." My brutal words were like a bucket of ice water on his ego. He froze, his eyes wide with shock. The hand gripping my wrist went slack and fell to his side. His hypocrisy had been laid bare. He had no defense. I rubbed my reddening wrist and straightened my coat. "Remember our appointment at the courthouse next Monday. Instead of wasting time at a fertility clinic, we should be dissolving the marriage certificate that binds us both." I decisively pushed him aside, opened the car door myself, and slammed it shut. Through the soundproof glass, I saw him standing stunned in the windy driveway, his usually proud silhouette suddenly looking desolate and utterly defeated. In the days following that dinner, Mia's mental state at the hospital began to destabilize. Daily reports from Leo's internal system revealed she was having frequent panic attacks, lashing out at staff, and constantly buzzing for Ethan. Her anxiety stemmed from Ethan's recent, frequent absences, citing family matters. After the visit with his mother, his demeanor had become distracted and brooding, a far cry from the attentive partner she knew. A manipulative woman's intuition told her that her place in his heart was in jeopardy. To secure her position, Mia resorted to a depraved plan. Through underworld contacts overseas, she secretly purchased a potent, synthesized aphrodisiac in capsule form. It was a banned, colorless, odorless substance that dissolved instantly in alcohol and could completely override a man's self-control. She paid a large sum to bribe a waiter at Aura Lounge, an exclusive nightclub where Ethan often entertained business partners. Her plan was vile: trap Ethan in bed, use his incapacitated state to get pregnant, and then force the Crawford family into a wedding, regardless of Helen's disapproval. That weekend, Leo and I had a meeting with a supplier of high-tech medical equipment from Germany. The meeting place, coincidentally, was the VIP lounge at Aura. Unlike the rowdy Onyx Club, Aura was a sophisticated space with smooth jazz and dim, golden lighting. I wore a professional, stylized pantsuit, looking all business. The negotiation went well. When our German counterparts excused themselves to take a call, Leo also stood up to use the restroom. I sat alone, sipping water, my eyes idly scanning the central bar. There, a suspicious-looking waiter caught my attention. He was furtively glancing around. On his tray was a glass of Macallan 25. When he thought no one was looking, he quickly pulled a tiny capsule from his pocket, crushed it between his fingers, and dropped the white powder into the expensive scotch. The powder fizzed for a second, and then dissolved completely. As a surgeon trained in pharmacology, I immediately recognized the substance. It was a banned central nervous system stimulant that, when mixed with high-proof alcohol, would instantly breach the blood-brain barrier, forcing the body to produce a massive surge of hormones and causing a complete loss of control. Who would dare pull such a stunt here? My eyes followed the waiter. He carried the tray to a glass-enclosed VIP booth in the most secluded corner of the lounge. As he pushed the door open, the light from the chandelier briefly illuminated the occupants. Seated in the center was the familiar, tall figure of Ethan. He was frowning, listening to a partner, looking exhausted. The waiter placed the drugged scotch directly in front of him. A sharp thought pierced my mind. Ethan's business partners, while decadent, would never use such a low-life tactic against him. The only person with a motive and everything to gain was Mia Hayes. Her depravity had crossed the line from a rival to a criminal. As much as I hated Ethan, allowing the man who was still, on paper, my husband, to be drugged and framed was an insult to my own dignity. Furthermore, the ensuing scandal would drag both our families through the mud. I stood up decisively and walked with firm, rhythmic steps toward that glass booth. This was the time to personally crush the third party's filthy scheme. I shoved open the door to the glass booth. The sound made everyone inside jump. Ignoring the shocked faces, I walked straight to Ethan at lightning speed. The waiter, his face pale, tried to step in my way, but was frozen by my razor-sharp glare. Ethan had just lifted the glass of Macallan to his lips. Before he could take a sip, I swatted the bottom of the glass hard. The crystal tumbler flew from his hand, shattering on the glass table. The drugged liquor splashed across the plush Turkish rug. Ethan shot to his feet, his face livid at my violent interruption. "What the hell do you think you're doing in the middle of a business meeting?" he roared. I didn't explain. I bent down, picked up a shard of glass coated in the liquid, and held it up to the trembling waiter. "What poison did you put in this drink?" I demanded coldly. My question made him collapse to the floor, too terrified to speak. His reaction was all the proof needed. Ethan was smart enough to understand. His anger shifted instantly to the treacherous waiter. He signaled his bodyguard to drag the man away for interrogation. The business partner, seeing the chaos, quickly excused himself. Now, it was just Ethan and me. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a complex, unreadable expression. He was about to thank me when a sudden wave of dizziness hit him. Though I'd knocked the glass over, he had swallowed a small amount. For a black market stimulant, even a drop was enough. His face flushed a deep red, and his breathing became heavy and ragged. He gripped the edge of the table, veins bulging on his hands. His sharp eyes became cloudy and feral. His tall frame swayed. Seeing he was about to collapse, I rushed to support him. His skin was burning hot. I wrapped an arm around his waist, using all my strength to hold him up. I had to get him out of there, now. I quickly sent a text to Leo, saying something urgent had come up. Then, I half-dragged, half-carried Ethan out a VIP exit leading to the underground parking garage. The short walk felt like an eternity. The drug was taking full effect, incinerating what was left of his reason. In the dim, damp light of the garage, he suddenly spun around, pinning me against a cold concrete pillar. The strength of a man who had lost his mind was far beyond what I could fight. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply. The faint, familiar scent of my fabric softener, mixed with a hint of medical-grade antiseptic. The scent of our 3 years together was like a second drug, snapping his final thread of control. He let out a low, guttural growl, and his hot, feverish lips crashed down on mine in a brutal, instinctual kiss. I struggled violently, pushing against his solid chest, but it was useless. He captured both my wrists with one hand, pinning them above my head. His kiss deepened, merciless and tasting of bitter scotch. Suffocating, desperate, I gathered all my strength and bit down hard on his shoulder. Through his thin shirt, my teeth sank into his flesh, and I tasted the metallic tang of blood. He groaned in pain, but instead of letting go, the pain only seemed to fuel his savage possession. He swept me into his arms, carrying me to a private elevator leading up to the five-star hotel connected to the club. The moment the hotel room door closed, a night of unwanted, frenzied passion began, consuming all boundaries and all hatred between us. At that same moment, in the main lounge of Aura, Mia, wearing a low-brimmed hat and dark sunglasses, hurried inside. She had timed her arrival perfectly to play the role of the self-sacrificing savior. But when she pushed open the door to the VIP booth, all she saw were shattered glass and a dark, spreading stain on the carpet. Ethan was gone. Mia went berserk, stamping her foot and biting her lip until it bled, her perfect plan reduced to nothing. Harsh sunlight streamed through a gap in the heavy blackout curtains, casting a pale yellow stripe across the rumpled bedsheets. I slowly opened my eyes, a dull ache radiating from every muscle in my body. The opulent hotel suite came into focus. Memories of the wild, chaotic night flooded my mind. It was a complete accident, a breach of every defense I had so carefully built since leaving him. I turned my head. Ethan was sleeping soundly beside me. In sleep, his angular face lost its usual arrogance, replaced by an exhausted vulnerability. The blanket was pulled at his waist, revealing a powerful torso. Near his right collarbone, a deep, dark red bite mark stood out starkly against his skin. It was the mark of my fierce resistance, the only proof I had been in this room last night. I refused to allow myself a moment of weakness. The logic of a surgeon took over. I quietly slipped out of bed, gathered my scattered clothes, and quickly dressed. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face, forcing myself into a state of maximum clarity. This was a biological incident, a result of chemical influence. It meant nothing. It would not change my decision to divorce. Leaving the bathroom, I grabbed my purse and walked out into the silent hallway. As soon as the elevator doors closed, I made an encrypted call to Ken, the head of security at Aura and a close business associate of Leo's. In a calm voice, I instructed him to use his highest administrator privileges to permanently delete all security footage from the B2 garage and the hotel elevators between 10 p.m. last night and 5 a.m. this morning. Ken complied immediately. All traces of me escorting Ethan to the hotel were erased from existence. 2 hours after I left, Ethan slowly woke up, a splitting headache, the drug's parting gift. He tried to piece together the fragmented memories of the night. He remembered being drugged, remembered Evelyn saving him. But everything after that was a blur. He sat up, the cold air hitting his bare skin. He scanned the empty room. He was alone. His clothes were strewn on the floor. The faint scent of a woman lingered on the pillows. A profound sense of disorientation washed over him. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through his right shoulder. He looked down and froze. There was a deep bite mark, the indentations of teeth clearly visible. The wound had stopped bleeding, but was still red and swollen. He rushed to the bathroom, standing before the large mirror to get a better look. The moment he saw the bite mark in the reflection, an ice-cold shock ran down his spine. The physical sensations of the previous night came rushing back, with terrifying clarity, the passion, the scent, the fierce resistance, and a sense of perfect, primal compatibility. It was exactly the same feeling from that fateful night 3 years ago, the night he was drugged and believed Mia had been the one to save him. Ethan's pupils contracted. For 3 years, he had been convinced that Mia was his savior, the one who had given him her innocence. But this bite mark was a key, unlocking a buried truth. He thought back. The morning after that night 3 years ago, Mia had been crying beside him, but her body had shown no signs of a struggle or the exhaustion of a passionate night. More damningly, the woman from that night had felt hauntingly familiar, a feeling Mia had never been able to evoke. His hands gripped the marble sink, his knuckles white. A terrible suspicion began to grow. If the woman last night was the same woman from 3 years ago, and that woman wasn't Mia, then who was she? Ethan stormed out of the bathroom, quickly dressing. He had to find Mia. He had to verify one crucial detail, a detail that could shatter the foundation of everything he had believed for the past 3 years. Every moment in that VIP hospital room the next morning was captured by Leo's discreet security system. From my office, I watched my ex-husband's world implode on my computer screen. Ethan's Maybach screeched to a halt in front of the hospital. He stormed out, his shirt rumpled, his face an icy mask. He ignored the staff and marched directly to the ICU. Inside, Mia was sitting up in bed, looking anxious. The failure of her plan had left her on edge. When the door burst open, she jumped. Seeing Ethan's disheveled state, she immediately launched into her masterclass performance. Forcing tears, she stumbled out of bed and into his arms, sobbing about how she had been worried sick, how she had gone to Aura and waited all night for him in the cold garage. Ethan stood rigid, not embracing her back. His cold, calculating eyes were fixed on the top of her head. He was not being fooled by her crocodile tears. Suspicion had transformed him back into the ruthless predator of the business world. He gently helped her back onto the bed, using the excuse that her hospital gown was disheveled. His large hand moved to her collar, deliberately pulling the loose fabric to the side. Her entire right shoulder and collarbone were exposed under the bright fluorescent lights. Her skin was pale, smooth, and flawless. There was no bite mark, no scratches, no trace of a chaotic night of passion. Most importantly, Ethan's eyes lingered on the hollow of her shoulder. It was completely bare. A vivid memory from 3 years ago struck him like lightning. On that night, as he kissed the shoulder of the mysterious woman, he clearly remembered seeing a tiny, crimson birthmark just below her collarbone. This morning, when looking at the new bite mark in the hotel mirror, that same birthmark had been there, plain as day. Mia, his supposed first love, did not have it. The truth, stark and undeniable, shattered the pristine image he held of her. The elaborate, 3-year-long deception was exposed. His true savior had been cast aside, while the impostor had been cherished and protected. The feeling of being manipulated and betrayed made his chest heave. Mia, sensing the sudden chill, nervously pulled her gown back up. "Is something wrong, Ethan?" He retracted his hand and slowly stood up, looking at her with the eyes of a stranger. No accusations, no questions. His terrifying silence was the cruelest verdict. He turned and walked out, ignoring her panic calls. The door slammed shut, sealing the impostor and her shattered dreams inside. Outside, Ethan immediately called his assistant, Alex. He demanded the full interrogation report on the waiter from last night. Minutes later, the file arrived. Sitting in his car, he read it. The detailed security report from Aura laid Mia's entire plot bare. The waiter's confession, the electronic transaction records, the security footage of Mia meeting him to hand over the drug, the $500,000 bank transfer, it was all there in black and white. Ethan threw his phone onto the passenger's seat, rage and regret warring within him. All the pieces clicked into place. The woman at the club last night, the one who had saved him, the one with the familiar scent and the crimson birthmark on her shoulder. There was only one person it could be: Evelyn Reed, the wife he had just forced to sign divorce papers. The same woman who had saved him 3 years ago. He had treated his true savior with nothing but coldness and cruelty for 3 years, only to be rewarded with her utter contempt. He started the car, the Maybach tearing down the avenue, heading straight back to the hospital where I worked. I was on duty in the surgical administration office. As I stepped out of the elevator, I saw Ethan waiting in the hall. His face was gaunt, his eyes bloodshot. He rushed toward me, grabbing my shoulders. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you hide the truth for 3 years? That night, the woman that night was you, wasn't it?" he demanded, his voice thick with pain and regret. I shoved his hands off me and took a step back. I crossed my arms, my expression as indifferent as if I were looking at a stranger. "Mr. Crawford, don't flatter yourself," I replied, my voice merciless. "I didn't tell you the truth because I never needed you to take responsibility. 3 years ago, you were the one who made a mistake, who created your own drama of misguided gratitude. I've paid the price for my youthful foolishness. Now, we don't owe each other anything." He was stunned by my coldness. He tried to step forward, to touch my face, to explain his blindness and his mistakes. He admitted Mia had deceived him, that he had been unjust. He begged me to tear up the divorce papers, to give him a chance to make up for all the pain he had caused. I smirked. His belated remorse was worthless to a heart that had grown cold. I pulled the official notice of hearing from the city court out of my purse and threw it at his chest. All the legal procedures have been completed by my lawyer. I'll see you at the courthouse at 9 a.m. on Monday for the final decree. Don't waste your time clinging to me with this pathetic, fake remorse. Doctor. Evelyn Reed is not in the business of salvaging discarded items. With that, I turned, walked into my office, and slammed the door. The click of the lock was a cold, final sound, sealing him and his desperate anguish on the other side. The truth was out. The scores were settled. From this moment on, I was free, ready for a new, proud, and independent life. The door to the VIP room slammed shut, a final, percussive blow to Mia Hayes' last hopes. She sat numbly on the bed, staring into space. The perfect mask she had worn for 3 years had been ripped away. Ethan knew everything. The fear was a physical thing, squeezing the air from her lungs. She knew his ruthlessness. Betrayal would be met with a terrible price. She wouldn't just lose her chance at a life of luxury. She might not even keep her life. The extreme panic sent her already failing heart into overdrive. Her heart rate skyrocketed. Excruciating spasms shot through her chest, causing her to double over, gasping for breath. The backup of blood in her heart began flooding her lungs. The toxic side effects of the black market drugs she'd used were now ravaging her last vestiges of strength. She tried to press the nurse's call button, but her arm was weak, lifeless, falling uselessly back onto the mattress. Just then, the ECG monitor, detecting the catastrophic drop in her vital signs, began to shriek, a high-pitched alarm that tore through the quiet hospital wing. Dr. Anderson and his team burst into the room. Mia was in full cardiac arrest, unconscious, foam bubbling at her lips. Dr. Anderson immediately ordered a high-dose injection of epinephrine and began emergency defibrillation. The paddles were pressed to her chest, sending 200 joules of electricity through her convulsing body. The imposter's life was now hanging by the most fragile of threads. At the same time, Ethan was leaving my office, my cold rejection echoing in his mind. He sat slumped in his Maybach, his head in his hands, a man utterly broken. Suddenly, his phone rang. It was the hospital's main line. It was Dr. Anderson, his voice urgent. He reported that Mia's heart failure had entered its terminal stage, triggered by extreme psychological distress, combined with an unknown toxin in her blood. The current resuscitation efforts could only maintain an artificial heartbeat for a maximum of 12 hours. Without immediate, radical surgery to replace her valves and debride the necrotic tissue in her ventricles tonight, she would die. The only person in the world who might be able to handle a surgery this risky, Dr. Anderson concluded, his voice heavy with resignation, is Dr. Sterling. Ethan lowered the phone, his eyes vacant. The woman dying in that bed had deceived him, destroyed his marriage, and betrayed his trust. Logically, she deserved her fate. And yet, faced with her imminent death, he couldn't just stand by and watch her die. He decided that this one last act, hiring Dr. Sterling, would be the final settlement of all debts between them. He would save her life, and then erase her from his own forever. He burst out of the car and ran back into the hospital, storming into Leo's office. He pleaded, begged, and demanded that Leo contact Dr. Sterling immediately and activate the emergency surgery clause in their contract. The powerful CEO was a mess of desperation and sweat, trying desperately to clean up the wreckage his own foolishness had created. From the 50th floor of a skyscraper, the city glittered below. I was at a French restaurant, enjoying dinner with Leo and a few close friends from the medical community. The atmosphere was warm and celebratory. We raised our glasses of expensive red wine to toast my official return to the future, free from the burden of the Crawford family. My spirit felt lighter than ever. Just as I took a bite of a perfect filet mignon, Leo's phone, sitting on the table, began to vibrate insistently. It was the hospital's emergency line. He put his wine down and answered on speakerphone, a habit of his. Ethan's raw, panicked voice, nearly a scream, filled the air. He had clearly snatched the phone from a doctor. He was pleading with Leo, demanding he contact Dr. Sterling at all costs. He recounted Mia's critical condition, promising any amount of money, citing medical ethics and contractual obligations, trying to force Dr. Sterling's hand. The table fell silent. All eyes turned to me. I slowly set down my silverware and dabbed my lips with a linen napkin. Ethan's desperate cries didn't stir a single ripple of emotion within me. To me now, he and Mia were nothing guilty, deceitful, and unworthy of a physician's compassion. I pulled Leo's phone towards me. I didn't bother with the voice modulator. Using my own, familiar voice now cold, sharp, and clinical, I spoke directly into the microphone. Mr. Crawford, you can stop wasting your breath. The ECG report on Mia Hayes was just sent to my server. She self-administered a high-grade, banned neurostimulant. That toxin has caused irreversible damage to her heart valves and induced widespread myocardial necrosis. At this point, not even God, let alone Dr. Sterling, can save her. The surgical conditions are no longer met. The line went dead silent. The shock of my identity reveal was undoubtedly more devastating to him than Mia's treachery. Before he could respond, I continued, I am hereby terminating the contract due to patient noncompliance with the treatment protocol. The $1 million deposit will be fully refunded tomorrow morning. Her rotten heart is the price she pays for her own greed and depravity. I decisively pressed the red end call button. The screen went black, severing the final tie to my filthy past. I pushed the phone back to Leo, smiled radiantly, and raised my wine glass high. The table erupted in a chorus of clinking glasses, and our celebratory dinner resumed. On Monday morning, at exactly 9 a.m., I arrived at the New York County Courthouse. I wore an elegant, custom-tailored white suit, the very picture of confidence and pride. Ethan was already there, looking like a ghost. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollowed out and bloodshot. The past night had clearly been his own personal hell. I didn't care if Mia was alive or dead. I ignored the profound regret etched on his face. I walked past him without a word and entered the courtroom. Under the stern gaze of the judge, 2 decisive signatures were put to paper, a final, resounding stamp of the gavel. The 3-year sham of a marriage was officially, and forever, over. I walked out of the courthouse and lifted my head to the brilliant, clear sky, a sky of freedom that belonged only to me. Behind me, I left a man sentenced to a lifetime of regret, to be haunted by his own conscience for the rest of his days.